feel like the Lord has given me a message for the hour to speak to someone's life. Tonight, someone is going to receive a renewal from the throne room of grace tonight. A renewal from the throne of grace. And where there may have been emptiness, where there may have been lack, God is going to do something phenomenal in you tonight. Give me your attention. Give me your attention for just a little bit. I'm not going to preach long because I feel like God wants to put His hand on some people's lives tonight. I feel like God wants you to have a heavenly connection, till you feel like you are plugged in to the recharger of heaven. God brings you to capacity and fills you up again. Amen. God bless you. You can be seated. The book of Numbers, chapter 17. The book of Numbers, chapter 17. And I'm reading from the New King James Version, beginning at verse 1. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, and get from them a rod from each father's house, all their leaders according to their father's houses, 12 rods. Write each man's name on his rod, and you shall write Aaron's name on the rod of Levi, for there shall be one rod for the head of each father's house. And you shall place them in the tabernacle of meeting before the testimony where I meet with you. And it shall be that the rod of the man whom I choose will blossom, and thus I will rid myself of the complaints of the children of Israel which they make against you. Verse 7, And Moses placed the rods before the Lord in the tabernacle of witness. Verse 8, Now it came to pass on the next day that Moses went into the tabernacle of witness, and behold, the rod of Aaron of the house of Levi had sprouted and put forth buds, had produced blossoms, and yielded ripe almonds. The rod that they were talking about here was a hardened, dried staff cut out of a piece of hardwood tree that was growing in the area. And the head of the 12 tribes, each tribe head carried this rod, and it was so that he could represent the tribe and that he could also oversee the tribe. It represented the authority given him. It represented his place, his status in his tribe. It represented that he was the one chosen by direct lineage, by eldest son to eldest son to eldest son, that he was the one who stood before the tribe. And this rod was passed down generation to generation. And God speaks specifically here and says, write Aaron's name on the rod of his father Levi. And I want you to notice that because I want you to see the impossibility of the situation. This had been cut off from a tree by Aaron's dad. And he had carried it for years. And after he passed, then it was passed down to Aaron to carry, representing he was the head of the tribe. I want you to understand that what Moses took from these 12 men was a piece of wood that had been cut down for probably in the area of 40 to 50 years, at least. It would like being your dad passing down his walking cane to you. It was dried up. It was disconnected from the tree. It might have been a branch, but there was no root. There was no moisture in it. It was completely bereft of life. There was no life in it. There was only deadness. There was only dryness. There was only an absence of anything that would show forth a possibility of even a bud popping out. There was no way that it should happen. There was no way that any of these things should live again. There was no way that there should be fruitfulness from them. There was no way that anyone could ever have any other purpose from these things than by the representation of the head. So these guys knew their dad had given it to them. But God wanted to make sure. He said, you make sure you write everybody's name on the rod that they give you. Because when this is over, I want everybody to know that I did it for a reason. Moses writes their names on them, places them before the Ark of the Covenant in the Holy of Holies, and goes to bed. Gets up the next morning, goes in, takes them out from in front of the presence of God, brings them outside, and lays them out. And something in the course of about 9 hours, from the time of the evening sacrifice to the time of the morning sacrifice, he tells Moses, when you put them, it will be that the rod that the man that I choose, it will blossom. It's going to bloom. Now, Moses brings them out, lays them down. They look at all of them. One stands out from the crowd, not because of the name that's scratched on it, not because it was made out of a different piece of wood, not because it was done in any particular way, not because it was painted differently, but because something that was impossible had taken place. Something that was improbable had happened. Something unexpected, something that was clear and tangible and undeniable had taken place. Not only had the rod of Aaron budded, but it had sprouted, and it had brought forth buds, and it had produced blossoms, just like God said. That's impossible. But then, to him who is able to do exceeding abundantly above all that you can ask or think. God told Moses, I'm going to make it blossom, but God wanted to add just a little bit more. And so not only had it budded and sprouted and blossomed, but it had produced ripe almonds. And in the course of about 9 hours, God had caused the workings of an entire producing season of a limb that had been cut off of a tree for over 50 years to become fruitful to the point of tasting the fullness of God. Everybody ready? God takes something that if you look at it at face value, if you go on your emotions and how you feel about it, there ain't no way none of them things is going to have anything happen to them. Much less God being able to use one of them to prove His point. There's no way that God can restore life back to something that is that far gone. It's impossible. When I was asking God this week, God, what do you want me to preach Sunday night? I know what you want to do Sunday morning, but what do you want to do Sunday night? He said, I want you to go in and tell my people that some of them feel like they're dry in their spirit. And tell them that they have been asking me, when will you show me a sign? When will you begin to restore life back to me? When will you begin to cause something to come forth out of me again? And he told me to come by and tell you that you have thought that it was impossible for God to do it. Some of you have made up your mind that this is as good as this church is going to get. You have already settled for where you are and for where we are. But I got a word for you tonight. And you can believe it, or you can sit there and watch us blow by. But listen to me carefully. What God has promised and what He has said, He will do. But I don't want you just to believe it to a place of hand clapping. Because when God spoke here and told Moses what He was going to do, when He did what He said He was going to do, He went a little bit further just to show off His power and to demonstrate His glory and to show that He was still Creator God. He went beyond what they thought God could do, whether they believed He would or not. You see, in this instance and in a lot of instances in our life, when we are going through things and we're going through dark times and we're in valleys, and it seems like sometimes we're walking in the desert, it's not enough just to see God beginning to change things. It's not enough to be able to see one flower popping up here after the end of a long summer when it's been dry and there's been no rain in the desert you're going through in your spiritual life. It's not enough sometimes to see one flower pop up here when you've been going through an emotional desert and you've gone as far as you go and you feel like you've already parched and dried up and your bones are baking in the sun. It's not enough just to see one little blade of grass pop up when all you've seen is barrenness. It's not enough just to see one little flower pop out somewhere when all you've been seeing is nothing but death and dried up things. But let me tell you, God told me to come by and tell somebody tonight, if you are ready and you are willing, God is ready to bring fruitfulness back into your life so that your eyes, you don't have to believe what your eyes see, but there will be a tasting that will take place in the very depth of your spirit, and you will be able to taste and see that the Lord is good. The proof will not be before your eyes, but it will be in your spiritual mouth. Impossibility. Not recognizing, not understanding how. I don't understand how God's going to prove His point using this. I don't understand how God can prove anything using my life. I don't understand how God is going to come and pick me up out of this hole I'm in. I feel like I'm so dry right now that baby powder is wet compared to me in my spirit. Alum juice would quench my thirst better than what I'm getting now. I'd rather suck on a green persimmon than to be like I am now in my spirit. Some of y'all don't know what a green persimmon is. I'm going to pick one someday and bring them to church and let you just pierce it with your teeth and you will understand what I... How many of you ever done that? You better bring about a gallon of water with you. You will understand it literally sucks the moisture out of your mouth. And even one glass of water will not wash away what takes place. There's some of you that you've been settling for a glass of water, and it's been like pouring a glass of water in the desert of your life. For some of you, you are so dry emotionally that if you poured a gallon of water into your emotional desert, all you would do is wet one spot, and then in about 5 minutes you would feel like whatever reprieve, whatever joy, whatever happiness, whatever relief you got from that one thing would be gone in a few minutes and dried up. And you could stand there and literally watch the clock, and in 5 minutes of real time, whatever you got from that would be gone. For some of you, depression is your desert. And no matter where you walk, it looms around you. And you feel like the noonday sun never goes down. That there's never a night in your depression. You would welcome a dark place, but it's always searing hot. And you're always dry. And there's no relief from the depression you're going through. And it seems like nowhere you turn, everywhere you look, there's no way out. For some of you spiritually, you feel like you have been up against the desert. It seems like an army of dust and sand has stood in front of you. And every time you knock one down and he turns to sand, there's another one there. And you've been fighting with death and dryness everywhere you turn. Every time you get one drink of water, there's 3 or 4 or 5 weeks of battle. And you feel like you can't keep going on. You feel like you're about to dehydrate spiritually. You don't even feel like you've got the strength to hold up the shield of faith some days. And Lord help you if you ever had to swing the sword of the Spirit. And some of you, your helmet of salvation feels like it's about to bake you alive in this desert you're in your spiritual battles. You feel like you're twice dead, plucked up by the roots, thrown out by the side of the road, and have dried up so much that all you're good for is a fire. God took something just like that, something that had been hardened over time. You might be in a hard place. Hang on. Hardened over time. No telling how many times it had been dropped. God took something like that in the span of one night. He completely transformed it. Now, I don't know about you, but a man throws a dried up stick and lays it in the presence of the Lord. And when it comes out, it's got branches, it's got blooms. See, a bloom is fruit waiting to happen. So that means that somewhere during the night it had to have bloomed, turned into fruit, and gotten to the point that it was edible, ripeness. So it said it budded, it sprouted, it blossomed, and it produced ripe almonds. Y'all didn't even get it, did you? There was something that was starting. There was something that had already started. There was something that was showing the bloom of promise, and there was something that was already fulfilled in promise. There was fruit there, the promise of future fruit, fruit that was getting ready to, a place that was ready to make a bloom, and something that was ready to grow into something that was going to make a bloom, and all 4 of them were going to produce fruit. Y'all hadn't got it yet, have you? God didn't give them just one almond. He said there were almonds on it, and there was also blooms on it, so there was future almonds going to come off of this dried, cut off stick. There was no possible way for this thing to ever get enough moisture in it. There was no way for it to be pollinated overnight. There was no way for it to bloom. There was no way for it to bud. There was no way for it to sprout. There was no way for it to make fruit. It was the only one that had blooms. It could not be pollinated. God did an impossible thing. But not only did he do an impossible thing, but God went further. He said, I'm going to give you fullness of fruit, but there's a blossom. There's going to be fruitfulness to come, and there's going to be a sprout, which means I've already got something started that's going to turn into a bloom, that's going to be fruit for down there later on, and I've got a bud over here. And when that first almond is gone, and when that blossom is made an almond and it's gone, and when the sprout has turned into blossoms and it's turned into almonds, and they're gone, wait way back here just popping forth out of your dryness is something that down the line is going to turn into a sprout, and then into a blossom, and then into an almond, and I'm going to make continual fruitfulness come into your life. If you don't think I work, you come up here and try this. And God's driving you, you can't stop. You got to get it all out. He won't let you quit. Some of you have been dry a long time. You felt like lately you have been in a spiritual desert. God's about to do a fourfold blessing on you tonight. You're going to get touched tonight. God's going to touch you tonight. But tomorrow, it may be Tuesday, it may be Thursday. But that blossom that He starts tonight is going to turn into an almond later on. And there's a sprout He's going to put on you, and it may be 2 or 3 weeks from now, but that thing's going to turn into some more fruit down there, and He's going to feed you again. And then He's going to take and bud something, and that bud may be 3 months down the line. God's preparing you for when you come up against hell itself, and when you least expected, right there when you needed the most. What God started tonight is going to reach its full potential right then, and God's going to come down right where you are and meet your need. I'm through. Somebody stand up. Brother James, come play. While you stand, I'm going to catch my breath. And for God to drive me this hard, somebody needs this. You hear me? Somebody needs this. For God to drive me this hard, somebody needs this. Never had Him show me that fourfold thing. But He did this time because somebody needs it. You need to know that God's not going to just touch you tonight. That He doesn't do a one-time thing. But it's an ongoing process. Every day you move, live, breathe, and walk with Him, there's an ongoing blessing coming your way. That when He that has begun a good work in you, He is able to complete it. Because when He starts, He doesn't just start for one day. Sister Ashley, He didn't just start you today and say, just keep going on what I did today. He took your life, which you felt like has been cut off from life for years. And He gave you the fruit of salvation. But see, there's also a blossom on you now, which is the promise of future blessing. But there's also a sprout that's going to bring something more on down the line. And there may be a bud. Like I told you, you may run into someone who's been just like you 2 or 3 years from now. And the bud that God started in your life tonight is going to come to full fruit that night. And God's going to feed and bless somebody else's life through what He started in you tonight. If you feel like in any way, emotionally, spiritually, that you need God to lay you before His presence and do an impossible work in you tonight so that weeks from now you'll still be reaping the blessings from it. I'm dry. I've been cut off too long. I need God to speak over me and let life come back into me. I want you to come and stand across the front. We're going to have intense prayer tonight. We're going to reach God.